Welcome to my channel where we delve into challenging economic theories. Today, we're unpacking the contentious argument often touted that war can bolster the economy. The premise? The notion that the aftermath of war, devastation and loss, can inadvertently stimulate economic growth. This perspective suggests that the reconstruction of demolished cities and infrastructure could be a job-creating silver lining. Join us as we dissect this theory and navigate the complexities of its economic implications. In the beginning, the myth of wealth after World War II is similar to the myth of the broken window. War never changes, says Ron Perlman's voice in the opening of the next games in the classic Fallout series. Each game shows a post-apocalyptic world that has been destroyed by nuclear war, with a few primitive settlements spread across the wastelands where people live in poverty and uncertainty. As death and damage have always been a part of war and always will be, so have false beliefs about the paradoxical benefits of war. Yes, it's true that war brings death and destruction, but maybe it's worth taking a look at the other side of the coin. After war, productivity and economic growth go through the roof, right? If you find it hard to think that there are people who defend the effects of wars, take a look at the general historical story of how the Second World War changed the world. Yes, there were millions of deaths and dozens of bombed-out cities, but in the long run, Germany benefited because the war turned old factories into modern ones, which helped the country grow quickly. The U.S. became an economic power because it had to make more public investments because of the war, etc. The myth of the blessings of war damage is a special version of Bastiat's old argument against reasonable economics, which is the myth of the broken window. Mythologists who believe in war blessings admit that breaking a window to give the glazier more work and money won't make anyone richer. However, they only say this because it's happening on an individual level. When we move to the level of nations and states, the rules change, and destruction can make societies rich. How did this idea get started, and why is it wrong? First mistake, mixing up needs and wants. It is true that war makes people poor, which makes their wants after the war even greater. But war mythologists take it a step further and come to the following conclusion. When people don't have the most basic goods and services, their wants go up. This means that demand goes up. And as everyone knows, demand drives supply. This means that there are more goods and services available than there were before the war. This is all because people had more wants after the war. The proof would be how quickly towns and countries rebuild after being destroyed and how much better they are than before. The biggest mistake here is to mix up what people need with what demand is. Demand is not the same as need because successful economic demand requires both a need and enough real purchasing power. In short, what does it matter that the people's needs are growing and that they are desperately trying to start making food, clothes, building materials, and toilet paper again when the war took away a lot of the money they had saved up that could help, or at least speed up the process of making new things they need? This argument is silly, even without bringing up war. The material needs of poor countries in the Third World are far greater than those of rich countries in Western Europe or the United States. However, the real demand for goods and services in these countries can't be higher because they have less money and less capital. Second mistake, putting buying power and amount of money together. War mythologists have a more subtle argument, which is to only look at financial signs, especially without taking into account the rise in the amount of money in circulation. Some people looked to the good economic performance of the world right after WW2 and said that it was because of the war. They forget, though, that almost every war, especially in times of fiat money, leads to a big rise in inflation because the government has to spend a lot more money to pay for war costs. So we have growth, not wealth, but the amount of money in circulation. Third mistake, putting the needs of each industry ahead of the needs of society as a whole. The war's destruction is actually a good business and a way for some people to make money, but only in certain parts of the economy. Some people can get rich quickly by making certain things. For example, the construction industry gains from the destruction of homes, factories, and even whole cities. Also, right after the war, companies suddenly do pretty well with cars and refrigerators and other goods that were hard or impossible to make or sell because of the war. This is because the time when these goods were not available, added to the desire for them after the war. But the fast growth of construction companies, or companies that make cars, electronics, or home appliances, right after a war, doesn't prove that the destruction caused by armed conflict is good for society. It only shows that the war changed the structure of demand because of shortages or destruction. People would still buy things, pay for services, and spend money if there wasn't a war. They would just be customers of other businesses. War doesn't make people's work more productive. Instead, it changes the direction of work and the balance between different areas of output. In other words, it changes the structure of the whole economy. Fourth mistake, putting building new stuff to replace the old stuff and the growth of the economy in the same category. One of the strangest things that people who study war myths say is that the destruction of war, such as bombed-out towns, was actually good for Germany and Japan after the Second World War. Why? Because of the damage, the Germans and the Japanese were able to replace their old infrastructure and factories with ones that were more modern, efficient, and better equipped. This allowed them to produce more efficiently and at lower costs, while, for example, the Americans had to work with their outdated factories and archaic infrastructure. Why is this a silly claim? If that were true, the United States, or any other country that wasn't at war, could easily make up for this supposed advantage of defeated Germany and Japan by destroying their own towns and starting over. If the old factory and its equipment were so worn out or old that their value had dropped to zero, then the destruction of the factory and its equipment would be good for the producer. There would be no need for war or bombing, and a demolition team would be enough to take down the old equipment and buy new ones. It's true that some of the war damage might have been less of a financial loss than it first seemed, because plants and infrastructure were old and worn out, but that wouldn't make the destruction beneficial for producers. Even more important, neither a private business owner nor a government planner can replace old structures or factories with new ones if they don't have enough savings or capital to do so. And what is the thing that makes capital disappear? War. Summary. It is true that certain scientific breakthroughs or the development of specific technologies that were sped up by hostilities may inadvertently lead to an increase in productivity and consequently prosperity in particular sectors of the economy after the conclusion of the conflict. However, this does not remove the underlying error in the claims about the economic benefits of war, which is essentially a new form of the old false myth of broken glass. This does not change the fact that there is a fundamental flaw in the assertions. Thank you for your continued support of our channel. Please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends if you liked it. We invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel.